One of the things that I always think about when it comes to a conversation about Christianity and the arts, and it's something that you deal with in the book. Um, and Here on the back row, we have a filmmaker from New Zealand, Andrew Hunt. Andrew, wave your hand. Uh, Andrew's a filmmaker here in New York City. He once said to me, the problem with the conversation about Christianity and the arts is that we're still talking about the problem of Christianity and the arts, which is a really good line, which led me to think uh, Christian is the greatest of all nouns and the lamest of all adjectives. Can you know what that means? Can you unpack why that has been, a struggle for you and how that comes through in your memoir?
Yeah, that's amazing. I, I mean, obviously, throughout Scripture, you see Christian used as a noun, um, and when it becomes this adjective in culture, there are all these rules that without any kind of fundamental basis that get established as to what it means. So now, if it's an adjective, what is the basis for that to be called Christian? Is what makes it a Christian film? Is it because Jesus' name is mentioned 7 times, or is it 8 times? Is it because it was done by Christians, whether or not it affirms what Christians believe? Is it because it's what is the basis for that? And I think where what I've seen personally is I want to create art, and if I'm writing that I took a bath this morning, a song about taking a bath, um, if I'm writing that from a joyful place, from a place of gratitude that is, you know, out of the worldview that I see the world through, which is a Christian worldview, then why is my song about a bathtub not Christian? And so the struggle becomes within the within the church for me is people the lack of explicit content people struggle with and say, wait, how is this Christian? And then outside the church, because of the adjective, they don't engage the content, though it may be something that is very relevant to what's going on or what's happening societally or relationships or love or so on and so forth. And so what I think, I just think culturally Christendom has created so many stumbling blocks for the outside world to even engage and to peer in to see what's happening. That true story. Just as an example, I write about it in the book. Uh, I had a concert and was invited to come watch NBA team practice, get to practice, and the coach. I said, "Hey, coach, I got a bunch of CDs here. If you want to give them out to the teammates." And and the coach says, "Hey guys, I got a gospel rapper here with some music for y'all." and and you could just see the cringes on their faces, and and I just went up to one of the guys and I said, "Man, you want a CD?" He said, "Nah, I don't really do the whole gospel Christian rap stuff, man." I said, "What do you think it's going to talk about?" He's like, "I just don't want to hear sermons. I go to church to hear sermons." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, those are the type of limitations that I feel like have been played. Like it could have been some music about, and that particular CD did have all kinds of different content on there, but it's just that assumption of what that adjective means when it's placed on something." So
Uh, I feel like I'm, uh, you know, television. The book is Unashamed, and it's just come out. It came wrapped in the most beautiful packaging that I've ever seen, and it's a real page turner. I opened the book, and the very first scene in the book, since people here have not had a chance to read it yet, and this wouldn't be a spoiler because it's just the first couple of pages, which you can get on, the
yeah,
iTunes store. They give out the first chapter for
sure,
free now.
sure.
Um, but the first couple of pages of the book are riveting, and I want to ask you about this. the scene is the red carpet at the Grammys. And you've been nominated for a Grammy, not for Best Gospel Performance or Christian Performance, but Best Rap Performance. And that's amazing. I think that people in the category were Drake and Kanye and Eminem and Kendrick and Lecrae. And yet, the red carpet experience is not an ideal one for you.
Right.
And the Beyonce, Jay-Z party. And yet, last night, you were on Jimmy Fallon and you played with the Roots. Can you talk about that tension of the awkwardness?
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about the awkwardness of living in between these two worlds?
Yeah. It's really just the presuppositions, and I think the presuppositions, especially in cities like New York or Los Angeles, in entertainment or arts community, where there's not this strong, overbearing kind of Christian culture that just kind of permeates everything else, like living in the conservative South, right? So it's almost like when people come across Christians, a lot of times it's kind of like, what? So what do you eat? You know, like, so just these presuppositions of like, I don't know what to do around you. I don't know how to act. I don't know what to say. And I remember the first time sitting in with the Roots, I remember hearing them in our little in-ears of, you know, some of the players saying, hey guys, watch what you say. We got certain guests here. And I was like, okay, well, don't catch me on a bad day, because I may disappoint you. But it took so much more time. Like, this is my third time there, and it took so much more time for them to grow comfortable to say, oh, you're like a real person. Oh, like we can like interact with you normally. And it's just a weird bias, a weird kind of prejudice. And it's not this offense of the gospel, as most people would say, well, the gospel is an offense. It's not that. It's this presupposition. It's this kind of idea of what you're going to be like. And another example I use is Native Americans. Most of us really don't know much about Native Americans. We have no real understanding of their culture or who they are. All we really know is what the media's put in front of us about Native Americans, and that's not media driven by Native Americans. So we don't have a true, we're not getting a true interpretation of who they are, because the voices that speak for them are not them. And I think a lot of times the representation of who Christians are in society and in culture are these limited, kind of skewed perspectives and views that create the narrative for who we are. And so as I'm navigating the entertainment world, it's really interesting, because I run into a couple different things. Either one is that initial like awkwardness, like I don't know how to deal with you. Two, it's the Nicodemus at night, like, hey, I'm one too. Or three, it's just kind of like, I don't really care, and I really actually appreciate that in a lot of ways. I appreciate people just be yourself, because I'm gonna be me, so be you, and let's interact and engage, as we would. So.
I want to talk a little bit about the book specifically. As I was reading it, I had two thoughts that were, it was a paradoxical thought in my mind as I was reading. One was, and by the way, I really commend it to you, because on the one hand, I was thinking, this is the experience of a black man in America. Mm-hmm. And yet, this is a book that is going to be read by a lot of white evangelical Christians who have absolutely no context for what it means to be a, a black man living in the United States, which is heartbreaking. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, I guess you could call it your fan base, your public, and how you're navigating these two worlds.
Yeah.
How do you navigate those two worlds personally, and what does this book represent for you as a part of that
Oh, that's great.
story?
Well, I think for one, it caught me by surprise that that there was such a strong kind of um, that I would say the ethnic and racial divide and tension was as evident in the church as it was outside of the church. So that caught me by surprise. You're thinking, I was anyway, in my naivete, I thought, well, I've joined the Christian team and we're all one big family now. And so this is great. And I'm making this music and look at all these people who don't look like me, who enjoy what I do. And they come to my concerts and they buy my music. This is awesome. And then Ferguson happened. And I said, hey, guys, this is messed up. And they said, be quiet and just rap. And I said, wait a minute. I thought we were family. I'm hurting here. I have a problem. And it was like, we stop talking and meddling in social stuff and just deal with like the gospel. And I was like, that is the gospel. So it was an eye-opening experience for me, to where I said, oh, and it helped me to realize, okay, you know, what angle and what route do I take here, right? Because I could just be the angry black guy who's, you know, kind of making a platform, always trying to point out the disparity and the gaps, and I could be the, you know, kind of passive, assimilated black guy who just says, hey, you know, I'm colorblind like you guys. We're all and then just knowing that you have this huge following of individuals, you know, from, you know, white evangelicals, you say, well, do I educate them because they don't seem, by and large, don't seem to want to be educated on this? Do I just focus on educating and consoling the black community and followers who buy into what I'm doing? So that has created tension, and I found that it's just kind of, for me specifically, it's being a little bit of and trying. I went to Yale to speak recently after all the racial tension that they had there, and no one was talking about unity. You know, everyone talked about justice, but I you know, I think it was written somewhere that justice without forgiveness and unity is vengeance, and so I want to see unity. I want to see equality. I want to see justice. But again, I want to see all that not at the, you know, not at the risk of there not being unity. And so so it's been a ride, but it's helped me personally because it's helped me reevaluate, you know, what I've come to know and what I've come to believe. You know, church history and all these different things. Like, it made me scratch my head. Oh, wait a minute, the Great Awakening, everybody didn't wake up. I didn't realize it. You know, like I don't think the Mexicans woke up during the Great Awakening. I don't know if the black people woke up during the Great Awakening. So it was these little things that helped me say, okay, there's nuances and there's different angles and there's different things that I need to absorb and to research, and it's helped me to be to be a better musician, to be a better artist, to navigate, and to still fight for unity at the same time, being a voice for the marginalized and disenfranchised. So.
Well, that's amazing. I think we'll probably want to circle back to that conversation. I have one more question, then you can begin thinking about who's first out of the box here with a question. I, as a lead into this next question, I was glad, as someone who is a theologian, to see how widely read you are in church history. Mm-hmm. And in biblical worldview and theology and everything. But there was, I think, maybe one of the most impactful things you said especially given the title of the book, is I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God.
Mm-hmm.
You deconstruct what that verse means in your own life, because you say that very often that is a verse that's used as sort of a tub-thumping, triumphalistic, I'm going to go out there and show them what's what in the big bad world.
Yeah.
That mean I'm not ashamed means something different for you, and I think it's probably much closer to what the Apostle Paul had in mind. So can you explain what I'm not ashamed or unashamed means for you?
Yeah. Obviously, you know, being unashamed of the gospel is the power of God. It is in some way, and maybe it was in my youthful idealism, it was more about I'm unashamed and not about what I was unashamed of. And so the emphasis was on me being unashamed, and look at me. I'm not ashamed. I'm not scared. Guys, don't be scared. Let's go out here in this big bad world and be unashamed. But then as you start getting older and looking at your own frailty and your own failings and your own brokenness and your own messed up, you realized it's the gospel, it's the power of God that I need to not be ashamed of and not sticking my chest out, because that's the real power. There's no power in me. As a matter of fact, I suck. So let me just sit back.
That's a lot of the book, actually.
Right.
A lot of the book is about
it's
you suck.
Right. I'm not the hero. I'm not the hero, and I'm okay with that. But I think that's what people need to hear, is because there is this sense of self-righteousness and piety that that I think, you know, Christendom has, you know, just created and we exist in, instead of a humility that says, like, man, without grace, I messed up. You know, I'm no good. There are plenty other people out there who don't love Jesus, that are better fathers, that are, you know, they pay their bills on time. They're, you know, more morally astute in some ways. And so for me, it's not me not leaning on my self-righteousness and what I can do. It's me leaning on the power of the gospel. So I'm unashamed to admit I'm a failure. I'm unashamed to admit I don't have it all together. I'm not a Christian because I have it all together. I'm a Christian because I'm weak and admit I need a savior. And I'm unashamed to admit that, as you will see. And there's all kinds of messed up things that I've encountered. And so, again, just unashamed represents more for me how good and gracious God is to use someone as messed up as myself. And what I tell everybody is that I hope people read that book and are healed from my scars, because I'm not ashamed to show them off. A lot of times we hide them, we cover them up, but when wounded people see your scars, they believe that healing is possible. And that's what I really want, is for people to say, huh, wow, all right, healing is real. So quick, like I just told the story, but the perfect analogy for me is when I was a teenager, I worked at a grocery store, and I pushed the shopping carts. Supposed to push them, but I started riding them. And I was riding one of them, and it flipped over and ripped my fingernail right out of my finger. So there's blood everywhere. I wrap it up in my shirt, and I run in the building. I'm like, I need help. You know, I'm freaking out because I don't want to even look at it. I don't know if my finger's gone. I don't know what's going on. And I run into the butcher, and I say, I'm scared, man. I need help. He says, let me see it. He pulls up. I take it out of my shirt. He looks at it. He said, you'll be fine, man. Look at me. And you know, and I was like, I will be fine. I will be fine. I will be fine. And that's what I want people to get from the book, is to just be able to say, you know what, if he went through and okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And that's what I'm hoping the book does for folks.
Brothers and sisters, welcome to church. Okay, Lecrae is sitting here. You've got to have questions. Questions, thoughts, interrogations. I would only ask that you ask your question in the form of a question. We have microphones. Who's going to be first out of the box? Yes, we've got someone down here in the front or in the middle. Maybe you could, as you ask your question, you could say, your name and your context and what you're doing with your art here in the city, and then ask your question.
Great, yeah.
Should we maybe restate the question, or you can
I
give
think,
the sense of it?
and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying how to navigate presenting what you're trying to present to the Christian community, but in the way that they want to receive it. Yeah. So one of the things I write in here is that I had learned to be unashamed in the midst of a godless culture. I had to learn to be unashamed in the midst of a religious one as well. And that means there's a lot of reliance on the Lord in the middle of the demands of Christian culture. And so you ask, did Jesus ever break the Sabbath? Right? Did he? Did Jesus break the Sabbath? No, he didn't, but he broke all the rules around it that were created by the Christian, the religious culture. He never broke the Sabbath, but he broke all these rules that they had built. And sometimes you're going to have to break the rules that Christendom creates in order to do what you've been called to do, and be okay with that, because these are not God ordained, like instituted things. These are just rules that we have created. That oh, you didn't say Jesus in this song. This is terrible. Where did this rule come from? And so I think there's a measure of, for me personally, I think there's people who make music for the church. There's music who make people from the church. There's people who make art for people who make art from. I like to do both, and just knowing how much intention for me, it just depends on the type of artist you are as well. For me, how much intentionality am I putting into trying to say what you want me to say versus expressing what I feel like needs to be expressed. And therein lies some of the tension of being a creative. So.
Wow. Yes, Joe.
It's obvious that authenticity is a really important thing to you, and commend you for that. I'm wondering what sort of practical strategies you have for keeping yourself grounded, because as you get bigger and bigger and you end up on more and more shows like Jimmy Fallon's, I'm sure you've watched a million train wrecks in front of you, and I'm guessing that you've tried to figure out some ways to anchor yourself down and not get caught up.
Yeah. One of the biggest anchors I have is sitting in this room. My wife. She is the most, what you see is what you get. Like, we will not be pretentious. We will not, just that whole, like, we do not put on airs. We will be ourselves. And having her in my backyard as that type of person is extremely helpful, because at the core of who I am, she knows me, and so that's helpful. And then I always say humility is a pursuit. It's something you have to pursue. That the perspective is a pursuit, and I think I have a fear of just waking up being drunk off my own grapes. I just have the fear of it. Like, I hate it when I see it in other people, and I'm like, help me not become that person, because I know it's possible. But a lot of it for me has been community, has been having people around me that have known me for years. Like, I have people around me who just, it's hard for them to breathe the air I have to breathe sometimes. Like, they're just kind of like people will stop me on the street and be like, can I have a picture? And they're like, why do they want pictures with you? They just don't. It's like, I don't, it's just weird to them. So it's been helpful to have people around me like that who just see me as like the skinny college kid who, can't get anything right. It's been helpful in those circumstances. And then just, saying no to certain things that I know are going to be a real issue and a real struggle. It's just saying I can't do it. And so.
Yes.
In your song Nonfiction, you talk about your kind of philosophical journey and transition in music, and you make reference to some authors there. I'm curious about, like, if you had an opportunity beyond a 3.5 minute song to kind of sit down with your colleagues, often in Christian hip hop, who have a different perspective, and have the conversation on more of a philosophical level as opposed to kind of just on a very, kind of meat and potatoes, you don't say this enough or that enough. Right. What would you say to them? And then secondly, in particular, on the issue of evangelism, do you feel like in our current landscape and time period, a better approach, between the explicit truth telling, points of the gospel, or a more nuanced approach?
Yeah. So on the first thing, I would say, I think if there's anything I haven't done enough of, is probably like explaining how some of my, artistic transitions came about philosophically, right? So people always scratch their head like, wait, how did you go from that to this? And and what I think everything that I create, it's like an overflow of what I'm intaking. And so, if people heard me on one particular song talking about, missionary work in South America, it's because I was currently doing missionary work in South America. And people say, hey, where's those songs at now? I'm like, I wrote them already, and now I'm kind of, there's a new chapter in my life. But yeah, I would just say that I welcome those conversations. I welcome the philosophical discourses because, I've had to have them, and the reason why I've had to have them is because I had to learn to be comfortable in my own skin, and I was mentored by individuals who were very gifted at proclaiming, and not. As I write in the book, I realize I'm more of a lamenter. I'm more of a psalmist than I am, Paul, who's going to proclaim these, authoritative perspectives on things. And I thought there was no place for that. I thought there was no place for being a psalmist and a lamenter because, all the examples I had before me were very like proclamative, bravado leaders. And I won't say I think prostitute's a strong word, but they thought that art was used explicitly for evangelism, and that was the purpose of it. And it took me learning that it's okay. Like God made the ocean, and He didn't make it into the form of a cross. He just made it, and it's beautiful, it's glorious. You can look at it. It's the ocean, and that's okay. And I think my pendulum swung hard when I realized that, no doubt. My pendulum swung hard to say, what? We can write songs about love and bathtubs and relationships and skies and birds. Like, what? And it made me, what I didn't realize was that I had been catapulted into the forefront of, this whole rappers who are Christians. And I didn't realize that I was in the forefront of it all. So it's like my way became the way, and that was never my intention. So as evangelism is concerned, I don't think there's the best way. I think we're all wired differently. Some of us, I know some guys, I hang out with them. We go to Chipotle. They order. They're standing behind somebody. The person says, "Oh, can I get rice?" And they're behind them. You want rice, huh? Well, let me tell you about a wedding that rice was thrown at eternally. But what's crazy is that the people will be crying in 20 minutes. And I'm like, how did this work? I could never do that. I couldn't, I'm not the guy. So, for me, it's been relational. It's been being involved in certain circles and having longer conversations and people feeling like I'm invested in their lives for a long haul and they're going to consistently see me. and I've seen the light bulbs go off that way in my experience. But that's, I'm not saying that's the way, guys. I'm saying, man, that's how I've experienced God's grace in sharing my faith. So, yeah.
Hi. I teach at the King's College. My name's Jenny Pike, and I teach musical theater. And I'm coming more from the perspective of someone who's been in the theater industry. And part of me, I admire your work, but I also admire what it seems that you have accomplished. I promise there is a question at the end of this, but it's going to be a little circuitous. I apologize. But it seems like you...
Anyone who can use the word circuitous can say whatever they want to say.
My boss is here. I have to. But what I'm impressed by is it seems that you've taken a route that has gone through kind of the Christian music industry, but then has crossed over and made the appeal into the secular world. And that's something I'm kind of envious of in a loving way, but because my experience in the theater community in New York City, and I'm from New York, born and bred, well, Long Island, close enough. But my experience in the theater industry is as soon as musical theater becomes remotely, sorry to use the adjective, a Christian, but even mention Jesus or God or allude to it, it is not received well by the secular community here. And I've been praying about how to approach that and what to do about that, because I find I'm a writer, and for my own work, it's really hard for me to try to step into the clothes of what the secular culture wants, and so I can't bring my Christianity there because it won't be received, but at the same time, then my art isn't as good because I'm a Christian, that's who I am. So my question is, do you think maybe the strategy, I guess, for being Christian, because we just want to be real about who we are, we don't want to have to pretend and wear these fake clothes, is to just find that Christian audience first, and then maybe when the world realizes the authenticity behind it, that they will maybe come around, because as far as being a Christian who wants to influence secular culture, I'm praying about what that approach is. I'm wondering what you think of that.
No, that's good. In my experience, the genres and being associated with a specific genre is usually what creates the initial tension, right? And I think that's because historically, the quote unquote Christian genre is so adamant about the message being there that they don't take time to tell the story well. It's like, well, yeah, we got a story, but we got to make sure the message is there, And it's like, if I want to, no one goes to the movies to see the heart's that the heart is deceitful above all things. You go see Lord of the Rings, right? And it's there. I don't want to walk into the theater and the heart is deceitful above all things. Credits, right? Like that's not we didn't come for that. We came for the art around that truth. And I think for Christians, we are so adamant about that being there that we don't take time to make sure the craft around that truth is done well. And so what ends up happening is that's what the genre becomes comprised of. And so now when people look at the genre, they're like, oh God, I know what this is going to be, It's, and no, I'm not, I don't know how you feel about any of the Christian movies that are out, but it's like that's what everyone's like, oh, we know what this is going to be,
We're using the adjective again.
Right. Yeah. So, terrible acting and a bad storyline. The story arc is going to be terrible, and they're going to, find some kind of awkward way. When the gospel's coming. It's like, and here it is. And so what I think is, what I've seen in as far as writers, I know I can't speak, to the theatric world as much, but as far as writers and and musicians are concerned, I've seen them just not associate themselves with the genre, right? Just make great music. So like a Leon Bridges or Tori Kelly or an Audra Day, they come out the gate making great music, and they're not, limited to this genre. But then as they're out there, there's these powerful songs that are gospel infused and that their hearts are bleeding about their faith, and they're well received by the general demographic, and the Christian community is like, oh, we love you. And so I've just seen that way more often than I have seen kind of we'll start here and get here. That's in my personal experience.
Will you please join me in thanking Lecrae for being here with us tonight?
My answers are so long. I'm sorry. I missed questions.
Lecrae does have, I think you have to get to your next event on the agenda, but thank you so much for being here tonight. This was a feast, and we will adjourn. There's still food. Take some of it with you, and we hope you'll come back the next time around. Thank you.